it means that it's about the character of towns. It's a concept that can use to describe the character of a place, especially urban places. So there's only the difference is when it's a town, the scale is smaller as compared to a city where the scale of the area involved is much bigger. So I've already shared the link to my members at PEREKABANDAR. We have also shared it in our Facebook and so forth, just because we are now embarking on a program called My Townscape Initiatives at PEREKABANDAR, which I will share before I start the lecture.
Okay. That would be great. I mean, I think if the audience, you can capture a wider audience, not only just for our UCSI students and because I think Malaysian Townscape is very important for the urban planners as well, urban planners, urban designers in Malaysia.
Yeah, I already shared to my contacts at DBKL as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. So Alhamdulillah. So I think we have 5 minutes before we start the lecture. Veronica, are you there? So Veronica, my student, she will basically help us with the navigation of the slides. So minta Dr. Shuhana nanti, you can cue her lah when you want her to change the slides.
I would tell next, okay. Sometimes they're more advanced than me. I haven't finished explaining that they will move forward. I think just I will say, when I say next, then only you change the slides. Okay.
Right. So Veronica. All right. Okay. So I think you can start sharing the first slide. I mean my slide first. So it's a introduction slide lah, Prof. So nanti baru kita tukar your slides.
You have to introduce first, isn't it?
Yeah. Not this slide there. Not this slide, Veronica. Week 9 slide. So we are actually at week 9 of this semester. So dah memang tengah-tengah lah. We should be ending this subject only in week 14. Lepas tu we get our students to concentrate on their design studio. So that would end.
It's not a studio. It's not a studio, isn't it? It's a subject. It's not a studio.
This is a subject. It's a subject for semester 5. Semester 5. So year 3 lah. The first half of year 3. Yes, correct. But basically all my students are year 3 architecture students. So they are in the design studio as well. So they are working on the project as we speak. Yeah. So okay. Veronica, are you able to share the slide? Yes. Okay, thank you so much. In the meantime, we get more audience to join, more participants to join this slide. We will just wait for another 2 more minutes and we will start at 9:30 sharp. Thank you, Prof, for accepting this invitation. I mean, we've heard so much from you, from my colleagues. I don't know whether you know architect Norizan, architect Shadilin. Those are the experts lah. I think they've already introduced to us of your profile actually. So,
still there, Norizan?
Yes, she is. Yes, she is. I suppose she will be joining this morning's lecture. Nanti kita say hi to her.
Your vice chancellor, Prof. Dato
Hamisa.
Yeah, she's my former dean and a colleague.
Oh really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Dr. Hamisa, yeah, we had a conference last Saturday. So she was our honorable guest lah masa tu. So I think everyone was very busy the past few weeks. So
if you mention my name, she knows me because when I joined UTM KL, she was the dean. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I will let her know that we have invited you here. Okay. All right. So right now there are 31 of us. Inshallah, there will be more coming in as we have shared this poster to everyone. Okay. For the time being, students, I think you can see if there are other guests coming into the room, you can help me to admit them. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, so it is at 9:30. Is that okay if we start now? Prof, are you okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and then greetings to all participants of this event. Okay, so this event is called UCSI University SABE Lecture Series, and today's session will also be part of the architectural site planning subject of semester. This is my slide for this subject. Okay, subject code AR833, architectural site planning. So my name is Aina Suhardi, and I am the subject coordinator. So I am excited to be here today and to have the opportunity to introduce our guest speaker, Professor Dr. Shuhana Shamsuddin, adjunct professor of Taylor's University, founder and president of PEREKABANDAR, Malaysian Urban Design Association, renowned academician and inspiring author of the manuscript called Townscape Revisited, Unravelling the Character of the Historic Townscape in Malaysia. So before we start, I've gathered some slides to introduce on our semester's town projects, okay? All right, so Veronica, next slide, please. So basically, for UCSI, a year 3 architecture design studio, we have been divided into 3 groups, so 3 units. So unit A, B, and C. How we divide this units are actually unit A is more the theme for unit A. So we have somehow divided them into 3 themes. Okay, so unit A we're looking into adaptive reuse. Unit B it's more on community empowerment. While unit C, the one that I'm handling, is on resilience town. Resilience. In general, actually. So for this semester in particular, as we are looking into old towns, so we're looking. Unit C will be looking into resilient town. So yeah. So this is a statement from Gordon Cullen. The townscape is the art which can transform a group of buildings from meaningless models into meaningful composition. So yes, it is. So a complete town from a workable diagram on paper into a 3-dimensional living environment for human beings. So that is by Gordon Cullen at his concise townscape book. Okay. So this is basically an aerial picture of Batu Arang, Selangor. So some of my students are working on Batu Arang. Okay. So next slide. All right. So can you go back, Veronica? Okay, so this is Unit B's aerial view of Papan, Perak, a beautiful townscape, I would say, landscape combined with a very small town. Okay, so this is a quote from Dr. Prof. Shana's book, actually. Recognizing the significant aspects of the townscape that contribute to the feeling of place is an essential step in the process of preserving the one-of-a-kind character of townscape. So I think this is where the students are really looking into what is the concept of the town, what is the idea of the town. Okay, so and she mentioned here this is one of the crucial factors that should be considered with the idea of townscape. Okay, next, yeah. All right, so Tanjong Malim, actually I've prepared a video here. Somehow we've tested, the audio did not come out, so it's okay. I'll probably share the link to you on the screen later. So this one, it mentions about nostalgia memories. So memories, yeah, it plays an important role in making places recognizable, where places are remembered based on the memories of the past associated with the place and thus evoke meanings to the people. Definitely. Okay. I think Tanjung Malim has a quite unique character in terms of its cinematic streets and a lot of nostalgic meanings the town itself. Okay. Next slide there. Okay. So basically, these are the three study areas of our three sites. Okay, so the first one is our left is basically Unit A Batu Arang. In the middle is Tanjong Malim, and at the bottom here is Papan. So students, this is basically our expectation, their learning outcome for this subject. So they should be interpreting an urban context into recognizable urban strategy with site and also program planning. Whereby, and at the same time, they should be able to demonstrate design strategies in response to social, economic, and also cultural issues with programs and also architectural interventions into. All right, next, Veronica, probably the last slide actually. Okay. So yes, thank you for agreeing, Prof, to deliver this important speech to the audience. Okay. So I surely know that this lecture will not only benefit to the subject of site planning, but also to others. Not only looking at the site scale, but also the urban scale as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce, to welcome Professor Shuhana Shamsuddin to give the lecture entitled The Malaysian Townscape, the Good, the Bad, and also the Mediocre. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll pass it to you, Prof. So Veronica, do you mind sharing the next slide? Sorry, sharing the next PDF.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Aina. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning to all the students of SABE UCSI as well as members of PEREKABANDAR who's available today to listen to this lecture. This topic is very close to my heart. Like Dr. Aina mentioned just now, I wrote a book about the subject in 2011 as a result of spending nearly 30 years teaching the subject to my students at UTM. So I thought I wrote a book so that it's easy for me to conduct my classes as well as to run the urban design studio. It also helps me to share the experience that I had trying to teach the subject of townscape to architecture as well as planning students, and the problems that I see in how the public as well as the professionals view this subject of townscape in Malaysia. Before I begin on this lecture, I would just like to mention that PEREKABANDAR, or the Malaysian Urban Design Association, has initially started on a program called My Townscape Initiatives, which is a smart partnership between PEREKABANDAR and all organizations, whether it's a public sector or private sector, as well as universities, in our role as the champion for good urban design and to see better quality cities and better quality townscape and to reclaim back the character of nation cities through this program where we embark on several initiatives where we educate the public, create awareness program, training program with the community, as well as work with the universities and their students on this subject matter, as well as with the local authorities to run training programs so that with the cooperation between the public and the authorities, we could see better quality cities in the future, cities, better quality townscape or more sustainable townscape in that matter. So far, the first university that has signed an MOU with PEREKABANDAR, a formal collaboration with her, is the Taylor's University, where the students are working on the townscape appraisal program associated with their studio project, at the same time linked to the My Townscape initiatives program of PEREKABANDAR. So this kind of smart partnership between PEREKABANDAR and university is very important, because we see our role as not just to advocate good urban design practice and better quality townscape to the authorities or the professionals, but we also wanted our future architects or future professionals to actually be motivated to create better quality townscape when they leave the university. So this we welcome all universities, all agencies to join us, in this effort to create better quality and sustainable townscape in the future. So I choose this topic for your information. I mean, if you see that I get a bit sometimes deviating from the topic also, but because I think I've given this kind of lecture for the umpteenth time. I can't remember how many times I've been talking about this subject matter. So like I said, it's very close to my heart. It is one of the major issues, actually, if you look into the problems of the urbanization and the way we build our cities in Malaysia. I mean, I didn't stop at writing a book about townscape. I initiated the setting up of the NGO called Malaysian Urbanism Association, PEREKABANDAR, where our flagship project is My Townscape Initiatives, because I think this is a very important topic to be discussed and also to be embraced by all those involved in city building, not just the architects and the planners, but also the public, also the other professionals involved in the. When we talk about city building, it involves all kinds of professions, who has some impact to the way the city is being built. Starting from initiation of the idea initiation goes into planning as well as design, and finally in the construction of the cities. Okay, why I call this topic the Malaysian townscape, the good, the bad, and the mediocre? I wanted to focus our discussion into this recognizing what is the good thing about what we have in Malaysia as far as townscape is concerned, what is the bad thing, and what is the mediocre thing that we have done to our cities. Because unless you know your problem, unless you are able to pinpoint the root of the problem, then only we can improve and build better quality cities in Malaysia. I think ever since independence, we are now in 2023. We received our independence in 1957. I don't know how many years is that. But throughout those years, we have not improved in the way we design our cities, although we have made progress in terms of infrastructure, transportation, and then amenities, providing some amenities, but we have not improved in terms of giving quality to the way we build our cities. So, okay, to Veronica, we can start with the first slide. If this was to be a face-to-face lecture, I welcome people to ask me along, because that is more interactive. But because it's on, I don't really like giving lectures online like this, because I feel like I'm talking to myself, or I feel like I'm talking to an empty room. That's not really engaging for me.
Sorry, Prof. I think we can also welcome questions if they have. They can actually write it on the chat room. And if there is one, I will probably moderate for you. Thank you.
Yeah, because at least I know that I'm not talking to myself. Okay. Before we begin, this is just some words of wisdom probably for me. When you are appreciating the design of one building, means we are actually appreciating its architecture. But when we are appreciating a group of buildings, then we are appreciating the townscape. But seldom do we hear people discussing about townscape. It's either you talk about architecture or you talk about planning. And the word townscape is actually associated with urban design, and urban design is actually the field that mediates or becomes the bridge that link architecture and planning. And this is one of our shortcoming in Malaysia, because urban design is not really being adopted or embraced much that we would like it to be. Somehow rather, this working in silo culture between planning and architecture has resulted that the feel like urban design, which is like becomes a no man's land, instead of the becomes the field that bridge the two major profession in city building. It becomes a no man's land whereby everybody claim that they're doing urban design, but actually then nobody is actually really taking the responsibility to do so. So that, and the result is what we see in our cities today. Okay, next. Next, okay. Okay, I will run this lecture. I mean, being a former lecturer, it's easy for me to plan what I'm going to talk, because otherwise you give me two hours to talk about townscape, it will be going all over the place. So what we'll be discussing first is just to give an overview about how people read the city, and why it's important to understand how people read the city and how is that related to townscape. And then only I will discuss about townscape, a very general discussion on the concept itself and the significance in urban design, why it's so important if you are doing urban design exercise, or you're studying about urban design. It's so important for you to understand what is meant by townscape as a concept. Then only we look into the good townscape, and then the bad townscape, and the mediocre townscape before I wrap up in the conclusion. Next. Okay. When you talk about one of the reasons why urban design as a discipline has a very strong or close relationship to environmental psychology, because it's so important for the design professionals or the planners to really understand how people read the city before we could do something about the city and building something that can be appreciated by the people. One thing we have to remember now, it's not just our role is not just to build the buildings or just to plan the where the transportation network is going to be located, where the parks or where the industry go to. But our role is also to actually provide an environment that is livable to people. How do you know that the environment you provide is livable? Is by understanding how people read the city, how people appreciate the city, and what does the city do to the quality of life of the people? Because otherwise we will be trapped in this syndrome called syok sendiri. So, a Malay term, syok sendiri means, self-appraising society, where you just think you've done a good thing, but actually you are destroying people's quality of life through your works. So in order to understand how people read the city, we have to understand the relationship between perception and cognition of the urban environment. You see, when people travel or move around in the city, they are actually reading the city, whether they realize it or not. And to the environmental psychologists, it's so important that we understand how people read the city through the way they perceive, which is a term called perception, whereby when a person is immersed in a certain environment inside the city, and the process of reading the city involves first perceiving, perception, whereby the environment provides stimulants or sensory that is actually going to be received by the brain through the eyes. And that's why if you look at Gordon Cullen's books on Townscape, he was emphasizing on the visual quality, the vision. He was talking about sensory, he was talking about serial vision and so forth, because the most important aspect of Townscape is the quality of the views that people actually receive as a result of being in the environment. And this is something that most of the time the professionals, be it architects or planners or even landscapers, we sometimes forgot about the aspect. We are more concerned about how we perceive the environment, and then the design that we are going to have. But it's actually, but to appreciate how the public, how the people actually read the environment through this process of perception is important, because at the end of the day, it is the people, the local community who's living in the place that you are designing is going to actually inherit the place, as well as to experience the place more than the designer themselves. Sometimes the designer don't even stay in that place that you are designing. So you are imposing your values to the people through your design. So by actually understanding this relationship, it gives the designer an upper hand in terms of how to design places that people can actually read clearly. And then okay, when you talk about perception, it's about direct stimulation between the qualities or the attributes of the environment that goes into your brain. The other important aspects of how people read the city is the cognition involved, whereby cognition is a process that is that is actually operating at a very a longer time frame. That means it's not just about the direct stimulations that you get from the environment, but it's also depending on the length of time you have been immersed in the environment, your social cultural background, your worldview, your value system. All that will influence your attitude towards the environment and the way you evaluate the environment. That is actually part of the cognition. I don't know whether you can understand. It's very, very complex thing, because we're talking about, I'm trying to explain the one aspect of environmental psychology is very much related to urban design, trying to explain it as simple as possible. But because the importance of doing so is so that you understand the people that you are designing with, the townscape that you are going to create will actually will be accepted by the people who are living it, because they are reading the city or the townscape that you're providing through this process of perception and cognition. That's why if the place has existed for a long time, the cognition process actually influence the evaluation of the place. Why people have certain attachment to certain places, they have certain bondings, they get very frustrated if you demolish certain buildings or not. This is because of this process of cognition. Because the longer they have been in a place, the part of the environment becomes part of their life and part of their memories of their place. That's why just now when Dr. Aina showed about the quotation that I wrote about nostalgia memory, it's very important. That is the very justification why we should conserve our historic fabric, is so that we do not delete the memories of the people of that place. Because once a person loses their links to their past, their roots, they will not have their own identity. And when they do not have their own identity, then we'll be searching for identity. And then sometime in the end, they will end up not having identity at all. And they will also deprive the future generation of the kind of identity of the cities that we used to have in the past. So the factors influencing perception as well as cognition of city is the social, like I mentioned, it's now social background, cultural background, age, gender, and ethnicity. And that's why it's not as simple as just adopting what is been done in other countries and plonk it into Malaysia and hope that it works as well, because of this factor. So you cannot have templates that you copied from other culture or other context into our context without understanding this process. And that's why sometimes it's very unsustainable to design places that doesn't actually take into consideration these factors that influence perception and cognition, because you will produce an environment that is a mismatch between what the user really wants, what the user really able to appreciate, and the kind of environment that you provide based on your own values system. And the importance of perception and cognition towards the identity of place is so that you will design places that people relate to the identity of the place. Why is so important for people to be able to perceive and relate to the identity of place? Because that has a connection to their sense of belonging to the place, their sense of esteem, their sense of attachment to the place is all related to this identity. And even though it may sound very subjective, very qualitative, and sometimes the city fathers, the urban managers and so forth, policymakers sometimes treat this, oh no, it's not really important to have identity because you can't really see. It's more important to just give the facilities that people want. But this kind of thing is actually influence people's quality of life through their having sense of belonging to a place. And that's why if we look into the sustainable development goals, the new urban agenda of the United Nations, they are trying to propagate for sustainable communities, because we want people to have a sense of pride in the place that they live. Places that have identity will foster this kind of feelings more than places that is having no character, no nothing to actually for people to relate to. And then time and temporal aspects is very important in the way people read the city. The longer the person are immersed in their environment, the stronger will be the bonding. The deeper will be the place, the attachment to the place, and the more they will be concerned about the environment, and it will influence their evaluation of the place. I think in Malaysia we're not really so like I said, very vocal in the way we express our attachment to places and the resistance. But slowly I see a growing trend now that if you look at every time the local plans is being exhibited, and then the process of actually gazetting the local plans involve public exhibition and getting feedbacks from the public, you notice that in KL it's very difficult for the local plans to be gazetted, because there will always be lots of objections from the local residents, because KL or the Klang Valley people, they're more educated, more people who have a strong sense of belonging to the place. There are more vocal, people who are very vocal. They got lots of NGOs, to actually express their viewpoints and so forth. So if you go to the developed countries, it's even worse, because the public voice, the public participation is very strong. And therefore, whatever you do must actually get the support of the public. And finally, if you look at the city center or even the town, if you look at the city and town, each town and city has a face, just like a human body. So our face, as human, our face is the part where people recognize us. That means our identity is related to the face. So if you show somebody to a person and you cover the face, it's very difficult for people to know who you are, isn't it? And the same goes for the town or city. The center of the town or the center of the city is the face for the town. And this is where we need to focus our townscape design. This is where we need to protect the character of the townscape, because this is the face of the city that people associate with the identity of the place. And another thing, because the center of the city or the town is also a center of meanings, because it's where the town normally started. It is the like the birth place of the city. So it has a strong it's deep rooted in the city, and people associated the place with that particular location. So the way when we look at urban design in general, we always have to focus on the city center if we wanted to give some kind of character and identity to the place. Next. Okay, a bit on mental mapping, because like I said, just now we were talking more about perception and cognition and how people read the city and the influence of townscape in the way people read the city. Another important aspect of environmental psychology that is related to urban design is the process of mental mapping. I'm sure everybody has heard the book Image of the City by Kevin Lynch. I think this book is like a compulsory reading to architecture and planning students. Why? Because Kevin Leach is the pioneer of the scholars writing about cities when he studied how people actually read the city, not just read, but image it in their mind. Why is it so important? Because that will give us an idea how to structure the city once we understand how people image the city. But the word image here is actually sometimes being misunderstood or misused by the media and so forth, which actually distort the actual meaning of the word. Now, through this process of mental mapping, and the mental mapping is actually a mental process. It's also, like I say, it's also uh, an aspect of environmental psychology where we try to actually read. We have to understand how people map the place, because when a person live in a certain place, or when they are actually immersed in the environment for quite some time, they will develop a map inside in their mind, which they carry everywhere they go. And sometimes they use this mental map instead of the actual map that to find their way around in the city or in the town where they are living. And this mental process actually helps people to understand the world around them. And it is actually an internalized, an internal organized representation of the part of the spatial environment that every individual have. Each one of us has a mental map, and the mental map from one person to another will be different. And it also depends on how well the city is structured or the town is structured for a person to have an accurate mental map. But most of the time, the mental map is distorted. It's not real like the real spatial map, because that will depend on the sociocultural background of the person and how long they have been in the place. But in 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 a nutshell, it is actually a model of reality. That it becomes a frame of reference where information about the environment is actually being placed to construct the map. And that's why, like I said just now, this research on urban image and perception require the subjects to produce a mental map of the environment study to see the impact of the environment towards the way they the way they construct the mental map in their mind. So in reality, we are not there is no such thing as facts actually, but what we have inside our mind is only messages that we receive from the environment, and which is filtered through a changeable value system. You see, our value system is actually influenced by how we read and how we map the place inside our mind, and that in the end will develop into an evaluation of the place. So the only thing that we know, that the only thing that we can tell whether a person is happy or not with the city that you build is through this evaluation process. Because when a person say they like the place, that means there is some aspect of the environment that actually meets their needs, influence them through their perception and cognition, and making them saying that they are quite positive to the environment. Like I mentioned just now, the most for architecture planners and landscape architecture, the most important study that's been done about this mental mapping is by Kevin Lynch, a professor in MIT, US, where he, through his study about the image of the city, he stated that the elements that construct the image of the city is paths, edges, districts, landmarks, nodes. Oh, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I repeated the landmarks again after that. So these are the elements to him in his study, which construct the image of the city. But actually, his work on image city has been misinterpreted by many as to constitute towards identity. In fact, when you have a clear image of the city, it does not mean you have a clear identity of the place. And that prompted me to do my PhD last time, where I actually criticized Lynch's work on the image of city and the elements that he used to construct the image, because Lynch did not actually study about the identity and meanings of a place when he formulated this theory on the image theory. He only looked into the structure, but people misinterpreted this and used this theory to actually associate it with the identity of place. And that's why I did my PhD to actually come out with the theory on identity of the place, so that I could actually complete the work of Lynch, to give a clearer picture of what actually constitutes to the identity of place, which is not actually directly related to the image of a city that Lynch has propagated. So maybe specifically more events or of semantic character actually influence the construction of this mental map, either derived from real life or the media. Sometimes the image of the city the mental map that we have for the place is actually influenced by the media. And that's why this process of city branding actually tap on this aspect. I'm sure you've heard about city branding, where you try to brand the city like you brand a can of sardine or so forth. I mean, like sardine, which is a better brand? To me, it must be sardine cak ayam. I actually, psychologically or through perception, sardine cak ayam is actually tastes better for me. But I think it's more influenced by this, by the way they advertise the product and so forth. The same goes now in city branding. You look at city as a product, and you find a certain brand to it, which is also related to the identity, but not really, because it's more of marketing, for marketing purposes. And this city branding, place branding is now being used at rampant by the marketing people. You see, if you buy a place, a new housing project coming out, they will find a catchy name for it, and they will brand it as if, oh, that will be the heaven on earth or so forth. And as to prompt people to buy because of this way you advertise the quality of the place. Okay, next. Nah, saya dah belum menyimpang ni. Okay, next. Okay, before we go, you see, I have to explain this process before I go into Townscape, because just to make you aware that actually the looking into Townscape is not just a simple process of just go and study the place, because actually it involves about how people actually read the place. And like just now I said, image is important because the environment is what people think it is. I mean, you may think that you have designed a good environment, but how people image the place is more important, because that's how they see it. You can force people to say, okay, I've designed a good city, and you must say it's a good city. No, you can't, because how people imagine it will actually prompt them to say that you have done a good job or not. And so it's difficult to communicate image accurately as compared to language and behavior. I think language is when you can say you like the place, but your behavior will be the real way of testing whether you like the place, because people don't lie through behavior. People can lie through what they say, but you cannot lie to you. Why? Because behavior is actually something that you do, that you cannot control. It's a manifestation of what you really feel or think inside. That's why studying the behavior of people in the urban environment and in the townscape that you wanted to study is very important, because that is the real representation of what people actually think about the environment. If you say to people whether they like the place or not, they will say, okay, sometimes they want to make you happy. They say, okay, you like the place and so forth. There's no problem and so forth. But if you study, when you do a behavioral study, then you will see that people don't go to the place, or even if they go, they will stay a very short while, because that will tell you actually they don't really like the place. That is the actual result. That's why when you do a study involves asking questionnaire or interview people, you must support it with the behavioral studies, because the behavioral study will be like the checking, will be the one that actually check whether what they have mentioned is actually a genuine answer or response or not. Okay. So, like I said just now, image is internalized construction of sensory experience and expectations, and determines and governs behavior. So the image people have of the place will govern their behavior, and a clear image enables one to move about easily and quickly. A good environmental image will give its possessor an important sense of emotional security, because it facilitates orientation and wayfinding the city. Can you imagine if you live in a town or city where every day you will get yourself lost? You know, you can't find your way around every day. You go mad, you know, because it's something that is so a task that is a routine. You will end up, you know, finding the environment so confusing and so forth. So it's very important to have a clear for us to design a city that has a clear image, because that will help people to their sense of emotional security. Like I said just now, there is this misconception, and I've heard it so many times as well, that there is a misconception that image is related to identity. I think I've already explained to you the why there is this misconception, and why I did my PhD topic is because to correct this misconception. And therefore, sometimes many attempts were made to improve the image, and yet the identity is still not clear. Next. Okay, now we get into the actual topic today. So, townscape, the concept. Okay, I think if you read the book by Gordon Cullen, The Concise Townscape, he's among the pioneers as well to write about townscape. I think Cullen and Lynch wrote their theories on this nearly the same time in the 60s. But Lynch focused on the structure, which is about the image of the city. But Cullen looked into the three-dimensional quality of the place to see the quality of views that we have as a result of the composition of the town that makes up the urban fabric. So both Lynch and Cullen's work actually complement each other, and it's very important. If you want to study about cities and towns, you have to read both of this book so that you have a clearer picture about how to appreciate the townscape. But the drawback of Cullen's work is that he focuses on the medieval cities as the subject matter to study about townscape. And Lynch also has a problem because he studied a city in US, Boston, where the way they built the cities in US, they are more car oriented, more grid iron being planned as compared to the medieval cities. And that's why their findings, you know, there is some kind of bias, some biasness involved because of the study that they did in that particular city. But I'm not saying that the theories are not good. I also still refer to both theories, but we just have to caution that, you know, why Cullen is focusing on certain qualities of townscape is because those qualities are associated with medieval city character, which we in Malaysia do not have, except for some parts in Georgetown and Malacca, where the time frame is actually parallel to the medieval city time frame in Europe. And that's why this prompted me to write the book Townscape Revisited. Well, that's why the title is called Townscape Revisited, because I'm revisiting all the theories about townscape that's been written by scholars all over the world, and I'm trying to find something that I can actually put it in the Malaysian context, because the kind of environment that we have in Malaysian context, and it actually we cannot really find it in the books about townscape that is written elsewhere. So the way I formulate the theories about townscape in the book is actually my interpretation of the townscape theories for Malaysian cities and Malaysian towns. Okay, so the very essence of townscape is about art of relationship. Now, you have to understand that when you build cities, it's not just one building involved. It's involving many groups. And it's not just about buildings. We're talking about many other elements, structures. And we also delving into the landscape. And we also go into the history of the place, the social culture, so component, so forth. So it's like a townscape is like a product. It's a product of the process of building a city by the society of that time. And this art relationship is actually the composition of the elements or components that contribute to the urban fabric. So very seldom we have a city which is being built at one go, one shot. You have the whole, I mean, you build and one day everything is being transformed. Very, I don't think we have that kind of city. Even if we have Putrajaya like that, it will start with phasing. The city is actually like a process of making jigsaw puzzle, you know, where you put one part, fit in another part, and one after another. And the relationship between these different components of the city will result whether you have a good townscape, and that is actually will be a reflection of whether there is a good urban design practice being done there. If you're not concerned about urban design, then you can see the product in the townscape that you have. So the city is an ensemble, you know, so in a way it's an ensemble of many physical and non-physical attributes that shape the urban fabric. And it's also when I talk about art of relationship, that means when you talk about townscape, you have to see whether one element is actually have a relationship to another. So you cannot study townscape in isolation or as an individual part or components of the city. Then that's not townscape. Okay. So when you talk about townscape, we are also looking into the art of juxtapositioning. Juxtaposition. What does juxtaposition mean? It means it's not about location of elements or not. It's about how you place one element. Okay, I've got nothing to another. So juxtapose means, can you all see? It's very difficult online doing online. Juxtaposition means how do you relate this element and this element together? How do you put it together? And when you talk about townscape, you're not talking about two-dimensional. You're not talking about something that you can draw as a map. We are talking about 3D. So say for example, how do you juxtapose this handphone and this is actually binocular? Okay, how do you put it together? That is what we call the process of juxtaposition. So it is a process of analyzing and composing the city three-dimensionally. So that's why if you cannot read the cities three-dimensionally, then you cannot understand the townscape. So I think it's easy for the architects to study the townscape because architects are being taught how to read the cities three-dimensionally. But for the planners, it will be a bit difficulty unless, I mean, like if you go into if you are studied urban design, then probably you're being trained to actually look at the city three-dimensionally to understand the townscape. So the composition of the townscape that achieve a sense of unity in design. Remember, when you are designing something, a building, you have to find a sense of unity in the building design so that people can see it as an architecture that is as a whole. So the process of designing cities is also the same, and creating a townscape. That means you must actually assess the whole town or the whole city as a composition and how you juxtapose all the elements from one part to another in relation to the immediate. For example, if you're doing site planning, then you have to study your context. How do you put your buildings and how you respond to the buildings as your immediate context? Because that is that process of creating sense of unity. Now, the whole idea would be to give the observer a sense of delight and enjoyable experience. Why you need a good townscape? Because we want people to enjoy being in the city, enjoy walking through the city. There is a kind of bonding relationship between the people and their environment through good townscape and through good design that has a sense of unity. So the visual effects of the whole urban setting that makes the townscape distinctive, having character, identity, and sense of place is the important target here. Now, a good townscape will also give a sense of pride to the inhabitants. This is the one that can relate to the SDG agenda, or the sustainable agenda, because we want people to have a sense of pride. Why is it important for people to have a sense of pride of their townscape? When people are happy with the environment, when they are proud of the environment, they will take care of the environment and they will not do things that actually destroy the place or give very bad image to the place. Why are cities in the third world, we find very, very dirty, so many litter, people pollute the environment and so forth. That is actually a reflection of the dissatisfaction of the people to the environment. Again, an important aspect of environmental psychology that we have to actually understand. When you study a place, if you see there's lots of graffiti on the walls, if you see there's so many rubbish being thrown all over the place, if you see places, buildings that has not been well maintained, so forth, there is actually a reflection of the attitude of the people. They are showing their dissatisfaction to this kind of negative actions. So that's why we cannot just blame the people for doing things that actually very negative to the environment, but we also have to blame the person who designed the city, or the person who built the cities. You are building cities that give a negative response from the user or the people. And the sustainable development goal, when we talk about sustainable townscape and so forth, is actually to provide environment that people will have a sense of pride, sense of belonging. They will then help to take care of the environment, and the environment will be something that is reflecting of their culture and heritage. So for historic cities, why is so important that we take care of our historic cities? Because these are the cities that was built over time, and it's also a reflection of our society, the beginning of our roots and traditions, which we should actually take care as custodian of the built environment and pass it to the future generations so that they can also have sense of pride to the kind of history that they have in the past. So if you are what if what we do now is we just concerned about ourselves, or we just destroy all this historic fabric, this old buildings, so that we can build our shoe boxes, building that just functioning and so forth, we will be depriving the future generation of the history, and that is not sustainable. Because you when talk about sustainability, it's not just about green building, low carbon and so forth. Cultural sustainability is so very important, because that is like the software of a computer, because it relates to the value system, that the kind of people that we create in the future is depending on how we build the cities now. If you are not concerned about our historic environment, we will be creating people who are not concerned about their heritage, about their history, and there will be people, who just don't have a sense of pride to their own history of the place. So, for example, like in Malaysia, we haven't got many cities where the historic fabric is really intact now, because it's always been subject to demolition and then construction of mediocre, what I call townscapes, to replace something that is having a very high aesthetic value in the past. That's the reason why we we work so hard to get the UNESCO World Heritage Site for Georgetown and Malacca, simply to show that without this listing, without this WHS listing, probably you don't see now all the historic fabric in Malacca and Georgetown have been gone. Even with the listing, you can already see lots of changes have been done, which is actually destroying the character and sense of place. Okay, next. I worked on getting the listing. Last time, helping the local authorities to do that. That's why I have very strong attachment to these places. So how townscape affects the way people read the city? Like I said just now, it represents the city's appearance. And another thing is that in a townscape, like you see in this photo now, a townscape is actually the view that is about the art relationship and the juxtaposition of the elements to actually to create a composition that is actually can be experienced by how you view the city. So if you look at these photographs, you have quite a unique architectural wise, very, very unique architecture, where you can see every single building, even though they're built as a row of buildings, they each have their own individuality in terms of design. But what do we do to this kind of building? You know, we subdued the architecture, and then promoting the billboards and the signages, and then we fill out the blanks with cars, you know, so that you can't really actually appreciate the view, because you will get knocked down if you try to even try to stand at the road to take a photo. So the eye, for example, then when you view a place, that's why it's very important to train your eye to see the character of a place when you're studying a townscape, because the most important tool to appreciate a townscape is the eye, because the eye is actually attracted to the noticeable differences in the townscape. Now, this theory of noticeable differences is being put forward by Amos Rapopo. He's another scholar, I think from America, who do a lot of study to actually to find out how people actually appreciate the environment, and what has the environment does to the way people perceive it, and how it's going to affect the people's quality of life. And he was saying that, you know, when people are in the city, we will try to pick up the noticeable differences. That means if the environment or the townscape is be designed in a manner where you cannot actually notice the differences between one part to another, then there is no quality to the townscape in terms of giving its identity, because people will just, it was just slip the eye. People will not focus to the place, because there is no noticeable differences that make people focus the place, and then build a certain image in their mind. Now, these noticeable differences of the townscape, actually one good book that it's an old book, but it's very important if you're studying about urban design, is The Human Aspects of Urban Form by Amos Rapopo. So it's a good study, it's a good book to read to understand the human aspects of urban form. And one of the theory is that noticeable differences. So the intricateness of the details, color, sound, scale, movement, smell, activity, these are very important things that the environment project to the human eye, that will actually influence how they read the city and how they appreciate the townscape. Now, the problem with the modern townscape is that it consists of very bland facade. I mean, the photo I show here is the historic townscape, you know, it's the older one. But the modern one is very bland. When you know bland, that means nothing much to talk about. Very uniform. Every part is the same, and very introvert activities that fail to catch the attention of the eyes and will easily slip our mind. So that's why sometimes when we go to certain places, we can, after we've finished, going through the place, then we've already forgotten about it. Sometimes we haven't finished going through, you already forgot about it, because there's nothing that stick into your mind about the way the townscape has been designed, because everything is so mundane, so bland, so is very is the same everywhere, because there's no noticeable differences in the way the townscape has been designed. And townscape with identity, i.e. the quality of being distinctive, having sameness in character within the place and yet different from other places, is what makes the identity of place. So you have to design the townscape so that it has its own, what is meant by identity is within the place, it has something that is similar, something unique that is only shared by them, and you can differentiate this place from the rest, then you can tell that the place has its identity. Next. Okay, the raw materials of townscape. Here, when we talk about townscape, there are 4 elements involved, which is the objects. When we talk about object, I mean for architects, this is what you are good at, the design the building. The building is one of the most important objects in the city. In fact, in my PhD, when I did the research on identity of place, how people perceive the identity of place, buildings comes number 1 in the way people read the city, and the thing that they remember about place is through buildings. Maybe it's because the way we design. our city that we project the building more. So that is where the people's focus is on the building. And that's why it's so important to design buildings that give identity to the place, because this is the object that people actually read and really focus their observation. The form, shape, texture, colors, and lines, it actually makes them whether the object is being remembered or not. Again, relating to the theory of noticeable differences by Amos Reporto just now. And then the setting and the site, which will influence the city profile, landform, edges, etc. That's theoretically, every city shouldn't look alike, or every town should not look alike with each other. Every town, in theory, must have its own differences, because not all towns have the same setting and the site influence, such as the landscape, the landform, and so forth. But what tends to happen, bad is happening, is when we treat every places as the same through the process of cut and fill. So when you do a housing scheme, even though it's a hilly place or not, and you cut and then you fill and then you build. So that means you're treating every place the same, and that's when you start losing identity. As another aspect is like the structures and buildings, the size, appearance, juxtaposition, color, texture, and ornamentation influence perception. That's why when you do design or building, you have to focus on this aspect, because this is the thing that people actually notice when they are in the place. It's not what they call it. But one thing that is not so good when you're emphasizing about size is that people start, trying to build taller and build bigger buildings so that they can stand out, so to make people remember. And then we can see what is happening now in KL. Everybody is trying to reach the sky. Everybody try to be as high as possible to reach the sky, so that they stand out. And so that people can focus. That is not very good, actually. Very very selfish and individualistic. And then vegetation and natural features such as water bodies is very important to give add quality to the townscape. And mind you, Malaysia is actually, the unique thing about Malaysia is that we are geographically, we are in a peninsula. So what thus peninsula means is surrounded by water. So in theory, so that's why I'm talking about theory, because in practice we do something else. In theory, we should have very unique cities because of our geographical location as a peninsula, and we are in the tropics. We are enjoying a climate which is hot and wet the whole year round. So our cities shouldn't look the same as cities in the temperate climate, or cities that have no water, like in the Saudi Arabia or like in the desert somewhere. Why? Because if you look at the principle of responding to the site or the characteristics of a place, then theoretically every city should not look similar to another. When they look similar to another, then the fault is on the planner and the designer, but not the fault of the people. So the second aspect is the spaces. When we talk about spaces, now urban spaces, the two key elements of urban spaces, if you refer to Rockcreer book on urban space, which are the streets and the squares. Because Rockcreer was studying about squares in Europe, where they got, and Europe, the Europeans, the way they build city, they will focus on the streets and squares, because the squares are the outdoor room and the streets are the corridors in the city. But this theory, if you try to apply in Malaysia, our way of building city, we do not focus on squares. We do not, in theory, we don't have squares actually in Malaysia. But what we have is padang. This is a legacy from the colonial way of the colonial town planning approach, where the padang becomes the major node, there's major space for recreation, to play cricket, in the evening, and which is actually becomes a setting for all the civic buildings in the city. But we don't have this character of a square, because, like I said, our climate at that time does not actually allow us to actually appreciate the squares during certain part of the day when it's so hot. But if you're in Europe or you're in a Mediterranean climate, you can really sit in the square because the weather permits you to stay longer in that particular space. So remember, climate plays an important role in influencing the way we build and design our city and also the character of the townscape that being produced. So spaces like parks, enclosed spaces, square lanes, such as streets and parks, these are important raw materials of the townscape. Like I may say, raw materials, then it's the role of the urban designer to actually to compose the city using all these raw materials. Another aspect is the movement, kinesthetic qualities and sense of motion. This is related to the change of levels as well as the landform. And then time, which is the temporal aspects that affect the lighting qualities such as the seasons, local climate, as well as the different time of the day. See, when you design cities or townscape, you also must think of what will the city look like in the daytime and what will the town looks like at night. So you cannot design a city very static, only one time frame, only one particular climate. I mean, it's more challenging if you are in a country with 4 seasons. You have to think what will the city will look like when in different seasons. But for us in Malaysia, we only have two seasons, like rainy season and the hot days. But even then, we cannot build good cities that respond to these two climates. What happens when it rains so much? We have floods. Why? We have flooding. Sometimes it's of our own doing because we do not design the city to accommodate for the extra rainfall. And you cannot blame the rain, or you cannot blame because the rain is being given to us by Allah. And you cannot blame why do we have so much rain certain time of the year so that we have flood, because we are already in that tropic near the equator where the tropical climate is such that you have a significant amount of rainfall at certain time of the year. But you have to design the city, you have to design the townscape to actually respond to the climate, not to get the climate to respond to us. So that's why I'm very critical about the way we build our city, because I think we know the conditions that we have, we know the kind of constraint that we have, but we never want to adjust and build the cities to respond to this constraint. By right, our approach is water sensitive urban design, because we are already in a peninsula. Most our cities are by the waters, and we have a tropical climate with so much rainfall. So our approach towards urban design cannot be the same as those people in Saudi Arabia or those in Moscow and wherever other countries that doesn't enjoy as much rain and sunshine that we have in this country. Okay, so it is the composition and the appearance of the elements that are read by the observer that influence how people perceive the identity of a place. So that's why you see this, the way we compose all these elements and the appearance of this element that will actually influence how people perceive. So this composition of the element must respond to the distinctive qualities of the townscape. Next. You have to remind me how much time I have, because I have the habit of continue talking.
I think now we are at 10:30. Probably another 30 minutes would be good if we can.
30 minutes? Oh gosh,
30 or 45 minutes. No.
So I have to rush through. Okay, so the townscape and significance to urban design is very important aspect. Townscape is an important aspect in urban design. And the reason why in Malaysia we don't focus on townscape is because we do not focus on urban design. That's why we hardly hear people talk about townscape. Now we hear people talking about placemaking. But actually placemaking is more about a social cultural aspect of creating places. But townscape is relating to design. And when you are not giving due consideration to urban design in the way we build our cities, then we have a townscape that is not to be proud of. Okay. Because the facade of the city that projects an image that by people is through the townscape. It is also a measurement of the quality of the views in terms of the aesthetic quality of the built environment that eventually contributes to the sense of place and identity of the place. Now, we build cities more towards quantitative, to meet the quantitative aspect, how many how many schools, how many housing, how many so and so, how many. But how does it look like? What is the quality it has on the views? Now, this is something that we hardly focus on. The quality is missing because when you talk about aesthetic, people always think that aesthetic is, which is very qualitative, is not important as compared to meeting the numbers. But when you don't give the consideration to aesthetic, it will affect the way people read the city. It will affect the quality of life through this process of perception, cognition that influence their behavior. So the process of building a town or city involves the act of weaving. So I always see that when you talk about townscape, the way city, you cannot allow different designers just to build and design the city the way they like. You have to have some kind of control. You have to have some kind of vision. What is the quality of townscape you want to have in the future? It's when you do not have any control, you do not have any vision about the place, the kind of quality of townscape you want to have in the future, then you will have a haphazard kind of townscape like we see here in this photograph, where all we do is just build the roads and then build the buildings. And we just let the architects do what they like on their side. And you cannot blame the architects to just do what they like on the side, because the architects has a client to comply to. And the client is not going to bother whether you got a good quality townscape or not, because it's not their business. You know, their role is just to make money from the project. It is the role of the local authority to actually becomes the one who oversees all the process of the building inside the city, and to coordinate the building of this so that it achieves a certain kind of quality, which they already have some kind of vision to it as a target. So this process of weaving in, that means if you weaving means, you know, not just plonking in. What we have now in Malaysia is that we just put things in at random, or following some kind of lines generated by the traffic, the roads. This is not weaving. To me, is called plonking in. You know, so that as long as you build within your site boundary, then you're okay. Weaving means when you want to build one building, you must see how this building is going to relate to the building next to it, in front of it, behind it, and also to the overall. That's called weaving. And the principle of keeping in keeping, which will produce good townscape, is not being applied here in Malaysia. Keeping in keeping means, you know, you must take care of your neighbors in terms of the way you design. You cannot say, okay, I'm just going to do this thing, and then you block the view from the neighbor, or you block access from the so that's not really happening very well, because of very to me very weak development control, in the sense that only certain aspects of the very quantitative aspects is only being focused, such as the setbacks, the density, plot ratio, so something very quantifiable that can be done without any thinking. But design control is lacking here, very weak, because you see, in I've done research which involves me studying how they control the design in UK and even in US. You know, in UK there's a very strict design control being applied, so much so that you cannot get planning permission, or what you call here kebenaran merancang, just because of the design. But here in Malaysia, it's very seldom. That's why you can see that you have buildings, you know, all sorts of rojak kind of thing here. So this art of weaving and the juxtaposition of the new additions to urban fabric will influence the quality of views of the environment that will stimulate the visual and emotional response of the observer. So the quality of juxtaposition and the interplay of these elements will differentiate between a good townscape and bad townscape. So if you do not do this coordination of the kind of juxtapositioning and the interplay of these elements, then you will end up having a very bad townscape. Next. So the act of weaving result with the townscape as a product. They involve the pattern, that means the form of edge. So another aspect is that we don't really look at city in terms of pattern that it produces. You know, when we talk about pattern, is the you're talking about two-dimensional. But in urban design, when you talk about urban form, then you are looking into the three-dimensional. So the form of the abstraction, the plan, and materialization of its three-dimensional form is very important to create a good townscape. And you can actually employ monuments to reinforce the connection to context through element form. Monument is a product of promoting public images, whilst public spaces represent the needs of the community than solely as individuals. But you cannot have so many monuments, because the role of monuments is actually to become giving focal points, or to give focus to certain areas, and to give some become a place marker, so that people will find the appreciate certain aspects of the city. But if every buildings in the city is to be designed as a monument, then you will have a very chaotic situation. Now, contextual response is important in terms of scale, proportion, and details. And this is another aspect that I think is missing in the way we build our cities, because there's no kind of control with regards to the sense of scale and proportion. You don't only talk about scale and proportion individual building, but you have to talk about scale and proportion at townscape level. This is something that is missing here in Malaysia, and that's why we can see that one building can just build without having sense of scale with the rest, and sometimes you have a situation where it's out of scale, where it really stands out miserably in the whole group. So diversity within a uniform environment is very important, because we cannot expect all buildings to look the same. If you have a very uniform environment, then you will have create a sense of boredom to people who view the place. But you must appreciate there be some diversity within a uniform environment that will give the sense of a whole, and where there will be a sense of unity being observed that ties the whole urban fabric together, and this is what makes a good townscape. Sense of unity, sometimes you can achieve through colors, through materials, through sometimes having one singular building that stands out and then unifying the whole thing, or sometimes you can use landscape to create the sense of unity. But this is a theory, urban design theory, that has to be understood when you're designing the townscape. I have lost the slides. Hello?
Yes, Prof?
Yeah.
I can't see the slides.
Okay,
hold on.
If I touch something.
The slide is on. We all can see it actually. On our side.
Okay, I think I've touched something. Sorry.
All right.
So okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Yeah, maybe what you can do is disconnect the T meeting and then join in again.
No, I have already got it. I must have touched something just now. Okay, I already got it.
All right, thank you.
So we talk about sense of unity. So what is happening now, when you have a sense of unity, you have a good quality townscape that can be appreciated, and people can have a sense of at ease when they are viewing the whole city. But a townscape becomes disarray. Disarray means it's really all over the place. There's no sense of coordination. When every building try to outshine each other, when everyone wants to become a landmark, then you will have a chaos. And when they are alienated from their neighbors, it will also have a townscape that falls into pieces. And when there is a death of the public realm, and when the spirit of the locality or region is being demarginalized by this globalization, or trying to copy templates or places, or the worst thing is when you have a pyramid, in Malaysia, or you want to create a Venice somewhere in Malaysia. This is actually demarginalizing the locality of region in terms of local identity. Next. Okay, back to now the Malaysian townscape, the typical elements that we have. I think if you want to know more, you can grab hold of my book, the Townscape Revisited, where I explain in detail all these elements. You can buy the book from Shopee, if I'm not mistaken. The Shopee sales is much cheaper than if you buy it from the publisher. You have buildings like the old shop houses, marketplaces, and so forth. Then you have the 5-foot walkways, which is actually one character of our cities and our townscape, which is quite unique. It's responding to the climate. It has associated with some part of our history during the colonial period when they introduced some kind of ruling to prevent fire in the towns at that time, where they introduced a certain distance where you have fire breaks, and then there will have these 5-foot walkways as a means for pedestrian access within the city. So, but what we have in Malaysia is also what we have in other cities, except for 5-foot walkways is a building typology that is quite unique to us, as well as Singapore in this Southeast Asia region, because of the climatic factor, I think. But what is lacking is the art of relationship and composition. This is what we are lacking in our towns. So the symbiotic interaction and cross-fertilization to high degree of the economic activities, architectural ideas, culture, and social diversities, which is actually being treated individually and not being integrated to produce a good townscape product. So basically, the organization of building and structure are based on lot division and grid iron pattern, and roads are the dominant element, and buildings stand in isolation to each other. This is actually my conclusion of what our townscape is at the moment. After studying, I think, of almost all the major towns and cities in Malaysia, I started my research on the typology of urban form in Malaysia way back in 1991, before I did my master's, and then completed my research in 2016 when I retired, and then now I'm more doing advocacy work in this. Not doing any more research. I think there's so much research being done, but nothing's got implemented. So now I go into awareness, public awareness and advocacy, because I think we need to educate people before they can appreciate about good townscape and urban design. Next. So the typology of okay, I already mentioned this now, the fact that we are peninsular, we are surrounded by water, and because of that, we are very water based. Our cities are water. The way we build our cities, we have many water-based settlements, water-based cities, but yet we have very uniform kind of townscape, which is very sad, because we do not use the water body or our relationship with water as a means to create character for our cities. We back off our waterfront when we have land-based transportation. Before that, we address the waterfront because we use our water bodies as a means of transportation. Our major problem is when we go for land-based transportation, cars and automobiles, then we start to back off and we treat our water bodies as our sewer or our infrastructure and utility lines. So there is an attitude which is not sustainable, making our water bodies, especially in the cities, polluted and then not giving character to our cities. Unlike cities in Europe, where their rivers are still giving character to their cities, because they have designed the cities sustainably, not to pollute the rivers like we did here. And like unlike European cities, where the character of the city was influenced by the period in which they were built and the technology developed during that times. Because I remember when we had to study the history of architecture and town planning in UK, I can actually go into the cities and then actually analyze the townscape and then detect which period it was built, what kind, through its architecture, because it's like a good record of the city through the townscape. But here in Malaysia, we cannot tell when the town is being built through looking into the architecture, because it seems that every period doesn't have a certain character to contribute to the townscape. Next. So in Malaysia, the function of city plays an important role. So I recently I'm actually in the process of writing a book with 2 other co-authors on the Malaysian Townscape. I try to, what I'm saying here, I will try to document it inside a book, as a sequel to the Townscape Revisited. I've been planning to write a sequel to the book for so long, and until now, I think it's going to start off because I got two co-authors that's pushing me. Because when you already retired like me, you tend to be laid back. There's no KPI to chase and so forth. But I owe it to the Malaysian people, to do the sequel to the Townscape Revisited, because I haven't given everything that I studied about the Townscape Malaysia in that book. So I have to come up with another continuation to that. And in this current book, that we're going to focus on the typology of the Malaysian townscape, and the typology is actually based on the function of the city when it was built. So this is a different factor compared to European cities, where the European cities, you see the architectural typology gives a character to the townscape, but here in Malaysia, the function of the city contributes to the typology of the townscape. Next. Hopefully this book project will materialize. So this is what I propose in continuing the study about the Malaysian townscape, is to actually describe the character based on the functions and the typology of townscape being produced as a result of these functions. So we have the earlier settlement, the colonial towns, the port cities, the royal towns, hill stations. So for last but not least, the ordinary towns. When we talk about ordinary towns, this is just a town that is not haven't got no specific function, but they exist as a part of the process of urbanization in the country. Next. We have to go very fast now. Okay, we go into the good. What good? We used to have. That's why I said, what saddened me is that in the past we used to be very good at building our cities. We produce good townscape, very sustainable townscape in the way we respond to our climate, our culture, and so forth. But somehow or other, along the process of urbanization, we lost that magic touch, which I will share afterwards when we talk about the bad things. So the townscape or earlier settlement. So you cannot say that I'm very critical. I'm just saying all the bad things about Malaysian townscape, but I also appreciate there's something good about the Malaysian townscape that we used to have, and which we should protect, because we are not getting good ones after that. So this is very unique. In the past, we managed to build very unique cities which have the identity reflecting our values, arts and crafts and traditions. We used to have very good arts and crafts. If you study about the traditional architecture, the ornamentation, the carving process and so forth being reflected in its architecture, and you can also see it in the way we design the buildings, the town. So the human scale, there was richness in ornamentation details, sense of life and vitality, which characterize the townscape heritage. This is what I call the townscape heritage, because it's the heritage that we get through the townscape from the past. The slow pace of development makes it us able to coordinate and integrate new development with existing ones. So unlike now, when there's so many developments going on, that they have no time for people to think or to the implications of allowing certain development to go on. But in the past, the development was very slow, so you can take your time to study the impact of one building to another. And then the row of shop houses apply the principle of diversity within uniformity. There is a row of shop houses, they have one thing in common, they are tied to each other, but they have their own individual design to give their identity on their own, and yet they can have a group value. And in the past, corner treatment is different. It's being applied so that you can have different design for the corners and different design for the intermediate buildings. But now every part of the row of shop houses is the same. So this is one aspect of the good townscape quality that we are missing now. Next. Next. Okay. And then we also have good juxtaposition of building, which create attractive spaces between buildings and unique visual effects such as serial vision and deflection. You can see this one last time. One of the best townscape is in Jalan Bandar, Kuala Terengganu, because I remember when I was teaching UTM, American Express give some funding through GDP Architects, to study this Jalan Bandar townscape. and then GDP pass it to us UTM to have a group of students to study this Jalan Bandar or Kampung Cina in Kuala Lumpur, document it, document the characters and so forth as a part study. Remember, American Express in New York, USA, found this particular townscape that we have in Kampung Cina or Jalan Bandar Kuala Terengganu, very unique. What happened to this place after this? I think for those who have been to Kuala Terengganu now, you can see that instead of this place fronting the river, it is now become part of the inland part of the city because there's a process of reclamation happening at the part where this row of shop houses fronting the waterfront. So to me, is one of the biggest mistakes to be done. It's so easy to reclaim, but you have lost one of the unique quality of the townscape through that process. Another unique feature of the old townscape that we have in the past is the row of shop houses. This is a building typology that is very sustainable because you live in the upper floors and you work in the lower floors, the ground floors. It means you do not have to travel, you do not have to pollute the environment through the transportation and so forth. You can make the city very lively at night because there are people living in the city center. Very sustainable way of designing cities and giving character. And yet now we have we have shop offices instead of shop houses where people don't live in the building. They have shops and then you have offices which they don't stay in it. So transforming from shop houses to shop offices has reduced this sustainability quality in the townscape, and also transforming the character because there is a difference in the way in a place where we are people living and people not living in the cities. And then we used to have rich and ornate facade treatment with good sense of scale and proportion that characterize the old shop. Scale and proportion is very important in urban design. Sometimes when you look, when the city becomes very, when you look at the townscape and it doesn't really make you feel easy, is because they are not applying a good scale and proportion. Because our eye will respond to scale and proportion that is actually related to the way our human body is being designed by Allah. That's why I think the golden triangle. I mean, for architecture students, you remember why you have to study the golden triangle process, to understand the human body, because the kind of scale and proportion must be applied in the way you design the buildings in the townscape. And then the old shop houses also have a sense of unity through the 5-foot walkways. Because the 5-foot walkway is a very interesting form of urban space where it has the element of a public in a private building. So for example, it is a transition space between the public space and the private space of the shop owner, and it allows pedestrian movement continuously, sheltered from the weather. You can also engage with the activities happening inside the building, because when you pass through the 5-foot walkways, you can see the kind of things or activities that is happening with a high degree of transparency being given, because in the past there's no mechanical ventilation being applied, so they don't close the door. So sometimes the shopkeepers, overspill, the display of their activities overspill into the 5-foot walkways. That creates a sense of life and vitality, which is very important in urban design and getting good townscape. And this kind of quality is slowly missing when you have offices, when they close the door and you can't see what's happening inside. And when you use mechanical ventilation, you tend to want to close the building. So the 5-foot walkway becomes just a means of pedestrian access, not a kind of, like I said, so the intermingling between the pedestrians and the activities of the building. Next. I don't see any question here. I guess everybody understand what I'm saying. Okay, so richness and ornamentation contributes to the sense. So you can see, in the old shop houses, in the way in the townscape, in the old townscape, in the past, you can see every building have their own individual design, and yet they are linked to each other as a whole. So this is what we call diversity within unity, uniformity. And the richness and ornamentation is being expressed through the design of the openings, the windows. You look at the scale and the proportion of the windows and the other openings like the doors, and then you look at the scale and proportion of the 5-foot walkway, where it is actually like an arcaded kind of walkway, and you are enclosed in that kind of a design. You are sheltered from the elements, and yet you can get a glimpse of what's happening inside the building. Next. So this is what I call the richness and an ornamentation that contribute a sense of it. And then this diversity within uniformity is also can be seen in the rhythm and the repetition of the old shophouses. This is, I think, been taken in the Kampung Cina or the Jalan Bandar, what I'm talking. Because if you studied some of the rows of shophouses, there is some kind of rhythm where based on the way they respond to the vertical and the horizontal rhythm and the design of the openings, there is some kind of break or change in the tempo or the interval between the row of shophouses. That actually, when people observe this, this is what I call the noticeable differences. You can see that there's some kind of break, then you see there's a change. For example, you have this kind of break in the row of shophouses through either alley or just like gateway or something like this. Next. So this principle of rhythm and partition is actually important when to create good townscape. Okay, another aspect of the shop house just now, which I mentioned, apart from the intermingling between the pedestrian access and the activities inside the building. Like I said, there is a strong sense of variety within the uniformity of the design of the old shop houses that gives that kind of townscape unique character. And also because the windows, the openings are not just designed to function as an opening, but it also part of the way you of giving identity to the building. So if you look at the kind of the window patterns, the frames, the ornamentations, the gables, the roofs, every building will try to be different, and yet at the same time they follow the whole principle of being part of a group. Their uniformity of design is also being followed through the scale and proportion. So like I said, there's a lot of design principles that you learn in architecture that has to be applied when you're designing the building as a group to make a good quality townscape. So again, like columns, not just columns is not just a column. And if you look at the columns are being designed to give some kind of character, as well as the roof form and the materials being used. Next. One thing you can see here, you can appreciate the facade of building because it's not cluttered with the signage and the billboards. Okay. But now you try to look at some of the shop houses, you can't even notice what kind of windows they have because they will have a big, huge billboards covering it. And then the 5-foot way, like I said, is actually where you have a situation where the interior is open to the exterior. This is a unique townscape quality that you can't have in temperate climates because it's so cold. But this is a kind of quality we have in our townscape because of our weather that permits us to stay in outdoors, shaded by the arcaded walkways, and yet able to appreciate the activities happening along the streets as well as inside the buildings. Next. Another aspect of good quality townscape is when you have a strong, good sense of enclosure when you design the street. Because this goes again to the principle of where you view a street. When there is a good sense of enclosure, then the view will be contained. Then your view will be focused, and then you will be appreciating the details. But if the streets or the roads has not got a good sense of enclosure, where it is exposed wide and open, then your eye will stray away, not able to focus anywhere, not able to appreciate the street frontage because there's too much to focus on. A good study being done on this sense of enclosure of street is very, very old book, old research done by Camille Cité called City Planning According to Artistic Principles, where he studied the design of squares and streets in Italy, what makes a good square, and see through the process of the proportion between the height of the buildings and the width of the street. To have a good sense of enclosure of the street where you can contain the views, where you can frame the view, is when the height of the buildings is twice the width of the street. But in modern townscape or in contemporary townscape, is the opposite way around. You have the height of buildings, lower than the width of the streets, and that's when you cannot have a good sense of enclosure. So when you do not have a good sense of enclosure in the street design, then again, like I said, you can't frame the view. There will be lots of space leakages. Space leakages is when your eye, cannot focus into a space. It is leaking everywhere. And another thing is when the street is being exposed, then the street frontage is no more longer important to you because you have the wideness of the streets to actually focus on, in order for you not to be in the danger of being knocked down by the cars and so forth. So that's why so it's so important that the way you design the city actually can influence not just the way you appreciate the view, but it's also on your quality of life and safety in going into the street. So if you look in the medieval cities that Cullen used in his as a case study in his book, there's the principle of creating elements of surprise in the way they design the townscape in the medieval city is when they have a very good sense of enclosure, where there is no space leakage, where your views are being framed and is being exposed and revealed in a series called a serial vision, and there will be lots of element of surprise. When you can frame the views, then only you can have the quality of element of surprise. So when you have lots of element of surprise inside in the townscape, then it enriches your experience inside the city. It gives you lot of sense of it's very pleasurable to be in the city because you are discovering a lot, out of your experience of being in the town through the townscape. It's like the analogy is like this. If you read a book, katalah misteri book ke apa murder punya who done it and so forth, kalau if the book at the very beginning when you read the book, it has already mentioned who killed the person, what happens, which actually something that you should actually keep it until the end, but you tell it in the beginning. Who wants to finish reading the book, isn't it? The same goes with the townscape. The modern townscape is like that kind of book where you can see everything. Where everything is being given to you in one shot. But if you look at the historic townscape, you have to walk through the streets because you can't see you cannot see glimpses of the street until you finish going through the street. And that is the kind of book, if you read it, you will be very you're still being macam how to say macam you're eager to find out, who killed the person, who did commit the murder, and then you have to read from chapter 1 until the conclusion because you want to know what's happening to the person at the end of the chapter. So that is the analogy between the good townscape and the bad townscape, when everything's been told to you, as you approach the place. Okay, next. I don't know whether you can understand what I'm saying about, I hope I do understand because that's how I read the townscape. Another aspect of the good townscape when you have a human scale. Because our eyes, we don't walk like this. Walking, your eyes focusing above. You walk eye level. That's why I always tell students, do not do a bird's eye view. when you do a townscape appraisal. Why? Because we are not birds. You don't appreciate the cities, flying over the city. Because, when I was teaching architecture last time, really makes me mad when I see bird's eye view of the place. Because I think, since when you become a bird? Since when you can view the city like this, flying over it? Because when you do a bird's eye view, you fly, you can only appreciate the roof form. You cannot appreciate the quality of the street view as you walk through it. So it's important, when for architecture students, to really be good at doing this eye level kind of perspectives, because that is the real thing. And that is how you appreciate a townscape with human scale. Because human scale, we only appreciate something that we can view at the eye level. Beyond that is only something that is reserved for the birds or the aeroplane. Yeah. So when you know that you design the townscape for eye level, then you have to focus where? On the ground level. That's where the activities, that's where the focus should be like. It's not to say that you cannot build. Human scale does not mean that you have to design buildings that is only 2-story or single story. No, that's not what human scale is all about. Human scale is about designing at the ground level where the human being is moving to be appreciated, and then you can build high. Sorry, because the one most important is just take care of the ground level for the humans to appreciate. Then the upper floors, then where you can put the. I remember when I went to Honolulu in Hawaii, Honolulu in America, they have also many high rise. But when you walk through the Waikiki in Honolulu, the district, Waikiki district in Honolulu, or you can't really see there's a lot of high rise because they take care of the ground level. And you can only see the coconut trees at the ground level, but actually the building is about 30, 40 stories high. But you're appreciating at the ground level the way they design it so that you don't actually realize that this building is actually a high-rise building. This is something that we are not good at. We are good at building tall buildings, high rises, but we don't take care of that human scale at the ground level where the eye is appreciating the townscape. Next. And then what we have to have in the past, we have clear structure with strong landmarks to aid orientation and place recognition. Now, it's important in a city. I mean, like what Lynn's saying, this importance of landmark is actually to not just to aid orientation, but it's also to indicate this is an important place where you can organize and helps you to remember places. So, I mean, Malaysia, we have only one town having this kind of very unique structure in Teluk Intan, Menara Condong. And this is actually a par with the Pisa. You don't have to go far to Italy to see a Leaning Tower here. And the good thing is that they have a space to give the setting to the structure. But the bad thing is that, the design of the building surrounding the space is very mediocre. Apart from the old shop houses. So that's why I say this is something good we have from the past, but the way we complement it in the present is not good, likely. So having monuments, towers and so on, something like this will helps to clarify the structure and gives landmarks to help the process of place recognition and orientation. Next. Again, we talk about human scale with good sense of enclosure is when you feel very comfortable being in a space when it's enclosed, it's like the outdoor room. If you look at cities like a building where the spaces, urban space is the outdoor rooms and the streets is the corridors. So then you can easily design the city if you apply these principles of design principles of treating spaces as the outdoor rooms and the corridor, the streets as the corridors. Next. Another aspect of the historic townscape urban structure revolves around the marketplace as major node. In the past, most cities in Malaysia, when I studied about the typology of urban form in Malaysia, most cities started by the river or the waterfront. And the key elements of buildings in these places are the jetty, the mosque, and the marketplace. So market, if you want to know the real culture of a society, if you really want to to know about the history of the place, look at its market. Because in the past, you can see a unique typology of design of the market, like this one in Taiping, where it's really responsive to the climate, and then it's really tropical because it's not contained. But if you look at the design, the contemporary one there, like Kedai Payang there, it's just like any other building. So only when you go inside, you can see the activity. And sometimes marketplace, they don't really need good design of building. All they need is the kind of activities, the uniqueness of the activities that's happening there. Like in Pasar Siti Khadijah in Kota Baru is the most photographed place in Asia, I think, if I'm not mistaken, by National Geographic. Why? Because the way they conduct the activity is so unique. And as compared to the way they conduct the activities in a supermarket. So that's why it's very important to have markets in the cities, because this is where you can display the culture. But the bad thing is that in the over the years, we had a policy whereby they relocate the market outside the town, city center, because to solve the transportation problem or the traffic problem. That's why Central Market in the end lose its wet market activity, which was actually taken over by Pasar Selayang outside. So you shift away the market activities outside the city, you lose that one of the unique place that gives character to townscape in the city. If you look at Barcelona, they still retain their wet market along the La Ramblas in the historic, along the most famous La Ramblas. There's a wet market there, still operating as a wet market without any problem. But for us, we're so obsessed, in making the traffic, run smoothly. We destroy our townscape by relocating our market activities outside the city center, leaving only supermarkets and all the activities that it's not unique to the place inside the city. Next. So the skyline of historic townscape in the past is usually influenced by the minarets and towers. I mean, like in Europe, it's influenced by the spires, the church spires and so forth. I mean, the most unique skyline in Europe, to me, is Florence, where the Duomo, the dome or the Duomo becomes the thing that creates the sense of unity to Florence, and all the spires of the church, create some kind of pattern to the skyline. And in the past, the townscape is actually influenced by the Padang, like this, which is the major public space and node in the past that provide the setting for the key buildings in the town, such as the district office, the malls, the town hall. And in the past, after office hour, you can see them playing crickets in the Padang, which means it shows that the Padang is not just a space, but it's also a space that is functioning, giving recreation and leisure activity to the people. Next. A square or medan, like I said, we don't have a history of squares, but what we have here is a space, an enclosed space. Even then, this is only you can see in Medan Pasar, because in the past there was a market activities going on in the place where tin mining activities has been operating. So it is a space that like if you write a sentence, a complete sentence, why do you need punctuation? Why do you need a comma? Why do you need a full stop? Why can't you just have a text that, don't have any punctuation, no commas, no full stop, no. You will not focus yourself into the content, isn't it, without these punctuations. So that's the purpose of squares. Enclosed space like this. It's like a punctuation in the city. They need a place for people to pause, to stop and pause, and then be able to enjoy themselves being in an enclosed space before they continue their journey. So if you can't really read an essay without punctuation, the same goes with the city. You need spaces like the square or the medan to become the punctuation inside the townscape. Next. Key buildings such as mosques, places, palaces are important place markers that facilitate the process of recognition and important for giving identity to place. That's why royal towns is a typology in itself, which should have its own unique quality in terms of the townscape because of the palace and the royal mosque. But if the royal town is being designed the same as other town, then you miss this opportunity of creating identity to this kind of key buildings. Next. Okay, now we go to the bad. Not so much to talk, but I think I don't enjoy talking about the bad things, the Malaysian townscape. What we have now, our contemporary townscape or the modern townscape, is that there's no art of relationship. Instead, there is the art of competing. With every building trying to outshine each other, or worse still, ignore each other. It's like an art of ignoring each other, you know, or an art to make sure people just focus on yourself and not the rest. Very car-centric in terms of the way we plan our cities, very mundane and bland environment. It's like an anywhere, nowhere kind of townscape. That means you take a snapshot of certain parts of the city, get people to guess where it is, then people will not have a good time to actually recognize the place. So characterless, placelessness, and lacking visual delights and sensory qualities is what we have now in our contemporary townscape. Not accessible for all groups and not walkable. This is one major mistake in the way we build our cities, because we thought everybody are superhuman. In Malaysia, that we don't really need to consider universal design. We don't really need to think about those who are disadvantaged, you know, not to be handicapped and so forth. But like me, I'm although I'm able-bodied, but I have a husband who's using a wheelchair. So now I'm very sensitive to cities, to townscape, which are universally designed to accommodate people like my husband. So now I can see, luckily in the past, when I was teaching urban design to the architecture students in UTM, myself and my husband, we will fail students if we find that in their design they are not giving access to the disabled, because this is something that you shouldn't even consider. Not designing for the disadvantage is a human part of human rights. You can't deprive those who are less able-bodied from enjoying our townscape. That was very mean of us, to fail just because you don't comply to the accessible. But to me now, there's even a law. There's a People with Disability Act being imposed on us to design cities or places to be accessible for all groups and to be walkable. But even with this, I've been involved in research to audit the public places in Malaysia. Even with the act, we still find places that is not accessible to those with the wheelchairs and so forth. So, I mean, you can't actually expect people to change their behavior to design because of the act. It actually should be part of the culture, part of the culture of having the empathy to people who are who are disabled and not enjoying not enjoying life as a normal person. Again, no sense of unity in design. That's a bad thing that we have now. Very individualistic and stand-alone design. We're so good at designing beautiful buildings on their own. I think I must say, I'm not condemning the architects in Malaysia. I think we're good at designing individual buildings, but we have not done well in actually putting every buildings together as a group. Island planning. Making is alienated from the immediate context, which I would call it as a bad neighbor development. Island planning means that you got your own parcel, your piece of site, you erase all things that is outside your site boundary, and then you design inside. Short sendiri lah. That means so you may come up with a masterpiece as far as architecture is concerned, but you are not actually contributing to the group value in the townscape. So blunt facade treatment, stereotypes, standardized design, cluttered with signages and billboards. This is the major issue now in the townscape. No coordination in the building height and massing, turning the skyline into an everywhere, nowhere cities and towns. Next. So now we can see our city dominated by tall buildings, out of scale and lacking sense of unity. It's like I said just now, I'm not saying that we cannot build high rise. We can build high rise, but we have to coordinate. And then we have to actually know what is the function of the tall buildings inside the city. How would it contribute to the townscape? Because we don't want to see buildings suddenly, standing out on its own like that, like in the is one of newest addition to the Skyline of KL. I'm not condemning this building on its own in itself, but how it portrays itself inside the townscape. It's just like a giant coming in, sitting in a group of dwarfs, and then trying to attract the attention to it, and let all the dwarfs, just feel miserable, being overshadowed by the new neighbor. Next. Next, please. Okay. Oh, invasion of but I don't know, something wrong with our the way we control. I don't think we don't have any control. We can just allow the shopkeepers to just put whatever they want to advertise their buildings and clutter the environment with poor color coordination, and we have a haphazard street environment in the townscape. Next. This is not Photoshop, Maya. These are real pictures of the real environment. So there's no clear hierarchy of the urban spaces. There's another problem. Our cities hasn't got a clear hierarchy of the urban spaces. So you don't know which is the most important space, how it's linked to the other space, how is it being organized to create a sense of coordination in terms of design. When you're not doing any coordination, you're not designing. So it's just filling in the blanks. So, and design of buildings that is not responsive to tropical climate because of the over-reliance on mechanical ventilation. We have very weak urban structure with no clear landmarks, place markers, nodes, edges, and paths that helps people's structuring of the place, leading to a strong image. The rapid pace of development results in very minimum control on design, where there's lack of integration between the new and the old buildings. So the block and standardized design with uniform appearance lacking in identity, no variation between corner and intermediate buildings. This is the main culprit. Juxtaposition is affected by the roads and layout of the traffic circulation, where you have a regimented layout of buildings with predictable visual effect. The roads is actually becomes the generator of the urban form. Rather than the road becomes a means of transportation, they become the means to dictate the way the townscape is being produced. Next. Okay, 5 minutes left in this meeting. Okay, so what we have now in our modern townscape is just a random display of groups of buildings and undefined spaces. So I think this is one of your case study, kan? This is a good example of, it's just plonking in building road, because the one that is the dominant element is the roads. And then the building just to fill up the space. And the street is wide and exposed. And this ugly and ordinary architecture giving a utilitarian townscape effects. And because this ordinary and predictable environment with crowds attracted to the shopping malls and inner cities, losing their sense of life and vitality. When you build so many hypermarkets and out town shopping center, you're actually killing the life in the inner cities. Next. And that has an effect on the townscape. Next. Another problem we have in the towns, the historic townscape, is the insensitive infill development that do not respond to the rhythm, sense of scale and proportion. Sometimes you have the row of shop houses has a already good rhythm and repetition of elements, and with a good sense of scale and proportion. And suddenly we have one infill development, we just break the whole rhythm and the whole group value or sense of unity is being destroyed by just one single insensitive infill development. Next. Which? Oh yes, Intan asking question.
Yes, Prof. If you mind. Yeah. So, Prof, what would you take on the multiple iconic high-rise that been recently built within our Kuala Lumpur skyline, including PNB and Merdeka 118?
No, like I said, there's no problem building high-rise, but you must have a clear policy on skyline control, and then you must have an urban design framework that actually allow you to look at the whole city and to decide how will the high-rise will be affecting the vision that you have about the character of the city. Will the high-rise become something like a wall that actually frame the city, or will it be like a series of landmarks that will highlight the important places to structure the place, but it cannot just happen at random. It cannot just happen, oh, you have a one space here, it's big enough, you can put a high rise there. No, it has to be based on a clear urban design strategy to actually with a long-term vision of giving character to the place. Okay. So next, so I like I said, it boils down to not focusing to urban design. So when you have a clear urban design strategy, there's no problem to even build high rises because it's been designed to be the high rise is actually has a certain role to play in the whole design of the city, not just being done at random to fill up the space. Another problem we have is bad neighbors. I mean, what does bad neighbors do to our life? Just imagine if you have a bad neighbor. I think I have one bad neighbor at the moment who always complain that I make noise, whereas I don't think I'd be making unusual noise. But if you have a bad neighbor, your life will be very miserable. The whole of your life will be miserable because of the presence of the bad neighbor. The same goes in the city. If you have a bad neighbor in the townscape, you're stuck with that bad neighbors, and sometimes I feel, I mean, like this in typing, I feel like, dropping a bomb, just so that obtrusive, high-rise building behind it, will be gone, and then so that we can design something that can frame the view, and with this church minaret becomes like a focal point in that place. So it's not so difficult to do if you really study the townscape and you really have a strategy of how you want to structure and giving character to the place. But if you don't have any kind of strategy or urban design strategy to give character, then this is what happens. Anything can come in, anything goes in the city. Next. Another problem is poor upkeep and maintenance. How can you hope to become a global city? I mean, winning awards for sustainability. If you still have this kind of badly maintained places, obsolescence and urban decay, it's right smack in the city center of Kuala Lumpur. So, like I said, that's why Japanese are good. One thing that people admire is the high standards of hygiene, high standards of upkeep and maintenance being applied in their urban fabric. They don't focus on beautification, but the more on the hygiene, sanitation, so forth, because the cleanliness aspect of the city is actually giving character to the place. But if you walk, you enjoy the architecture, suddenly your eyes is focused on this kind of views, it will upset you a bit. And if you were to live in that place, it will upset you more. Next. And then no sense of respect to heritage buildings. It's not easy, to get buildings, historic buildings. It takes 100 years, 200, 300 years sometimes, for the buildings to be built. And they have been around for several decades and so forth. And then it takes very short time just to demolish them. Just 1 hour, 2 hours to demolish 100 years history and so forth. So this is again relates to our value system. We tend to appreciate new things in the townscape, and then those things of heritage value, even though it has a high architectural or aesthetic value, is because they are old and you see them as something very negative and something that you need to just erase from the townscape, and at the same time erasing the memories of the place for the people. Next. Okay, we finally go into the mediocre. There's nothing much to talk about, but the mediocrity is breeding everywhere in our city in Asia. We have a situation where there is the architecture of the ordinary everywhere and nowhere. I always like to use the term everywhere, nowhere. It means, it hasn't got any value as far as identity or sense of place is concerned, because you can see it anywhere. And it's a very stereotype kind of townscape, very utilitarian in design that is not responsive to local identity. The one of the culprit root of the problem is the copy-paste syndrome. We are so, I don't know why, as if we have lack of ideas, we like to copy. even you when people do, I've read many reports, plans, which are copy pasted, from other places. Sometimes really it's so easy when you are doing things, with the computer. You can just copy paste whatever plan and put inside. You have policies that can be done elsewhere, put inside your in the local plan and so forth. The same goes with design. We have templates, waterfront. At one stage, we have this waterfront template design being done in Australia, and then you want to do it in Kuching or something done in South San Francisco. You want to do it in other cities here in Malaysia. So this this access to information from all over the world actually has some problem, because it reduces local identity. It creates this everywhere nowhere kind of syndrome. And the mediocrity is actually also due to result of the poor sense of scale and proportion. I mean, people, when they design, I don't think they use an architect to design some of the buildings that we see in our cities. It's just like a shoebox. You just put structures, you just put columns and roofs, and then you put the windows and the doors, and then you got a building in the city. So, and then we have streets that are exposed with no sense of enclosure to frame the views, no legibility in the street design and street frontage, unanimous design. Unanimous design is the antithesis of a building design that gives identity. Another aspect is the predictable views that doesn't stimulate the eyes. You can predict the views, you can see it anywhere that you go. Next. So design that is not in keeping the existing buildings enclosing space like this. I mean, you have a beautiful space here that is enclosed by all the buildings, and you have this in Intan, there you have the leaning tower in Intan, and then suddenly you see this building. You look at the shop houses, they have a sense of unity and a sense of uniformity, respecting the space. But then suddenly you have this row of shop, shop office or supermarket, there is not responding to anything. And this is kind of mediocrity that you can see everywhere in our townscape. And either in the ordinary towns or even in the major towns and cities. Next. There is no principle of keeping being applied in design.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam. Abira.
Okay, tak ada, because it's already 11:40. Maybe we would like to finish this slide very soon, because we would like to open up for Q&A section. Tapi tak apa, I think I checked my student. Yeah, we're almost there.
Yeah, we're almost there already. I mean, because mediocrity, I don't enjoy talking this much anyway. I can go very fast.
Okay, all right.
So
Thank you.
Our problem is that the car-centric townscape breeds mediocrity. You look at our city now. Oh, you can see the cars. Everybody. That's why we spend a lot of money buying flashy cars, because the cars are so dominant in the townscape. Who wants to spend money to do a good, nice building? Because when what is so dominant in the cities are the cars. But this is the kind of a townscape we have when we give priority to the cars and we are not concerned about urban design. Next. So the townscape of the ordinary is where we have buildings scattered all over the place, no sense of organization or spaces to unify the design. Dominant features are the roads. Why I call it, there's a difference between roads and streets, because streets are behavioral setting that gives character to the place. Roads are just a means of access from one place to another. You look at here in Alostar, we've done some urban design studies last time where it has all the good ingredients to make a beautiful city with good character, but it's not being designed. There's no clear urban design strategy to give a sense of unity to design, where you have the mosque addressing the river, and you have the palace, and you have the padang addressing the. But even if you have a good ingredients, say for example, you got very good quality ingredients to make a menu to something of it. But if you got a lousy cook or lousy chef, even though you got fresh vegetable, fresh product, they will not make a good meal out of it, because they are hopeless at cooking. So this is what's happening now in our cities. Next. Look what we've done to our rivers, our water bodies. We have a townscape devoid of aesthetic and visual delight consideration. We never see river as part of the asset of a city that gives character to the place, that give a sense of meaning. People are attracted to water because 3/4 of our body is made of water. There is a natural affinity between humans and water. There is a natural affinity. Everybody have this strong relation to water. And whenever you are designing something in a town where there is a water body, you should exploit it. That's what they did in the UK, in the developed country. They exploited the water bodies to give character to the city, the townscape. But what do? We treat it as a part of the sewer system. We turn the river into a monsoon drain. So again, this is something to do with our value system and which actually have an effect to the townscape. Next. Fill in the blank, townscape. With no urban. Can anybody guess where this is? No, when you do not have considered any urban design, to design, then you can just, you got a space, you just put the building. You got a space, you just put the roads. And then let things happen on their own without any kind of strategy to create the sense of unity or to organize the spaces into a clear hierarchy. Anybody can give a good guess of where this is. Even I now have to struggle to remember where this photo is being taken. Why I'm doing this from an area point of view, just to show how the townscape is being created just as a result of filling in the blanks. Filling in the blanks kind of approach. Next. So island planning and individualistic design will actually create beautiful buildings on their own, but they don't talk to each other. And then you just let the roads, take over and run the show. Next. So engineers actually will be happy, because they do lots of things to the roads, and then we just take whatever left to put the buildings. So when townscape is predictable and lacking in character to help people remember the place, then the eye will be focusing on the obtrusive elements such as traffic or the advertisement boards. So the city will be read for its utilitarian function due to the lack of aesthetic quality and mediocrity. So this is again like an anywhere, nowhere kind of townscape that we can see in many places in Malaysia. Next. Oh, another new trend of urban beautification attempts is by painting murals on facade. And it's like rampant now. Everybody is doing murals, back lanes, front lane, whatever it is. But why I call it beautification? Because this is an attempt just to sweep the problem under the carpet. It is a short-term solution to deal with the problem of upkeep. But once the paintings faded, then you're back to the same problem. It's like applying makeup, after some time the makeup will be red and then you can see your ugly face. Through the true colors, you can see the ugly face when all the makeup has disappeared. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't go do murals, but we have to not do it overboard. And you do not do it everywhere. Do not do murals on historic buildings or heritage buildings, because that will reduce the authenticity of the building and you're disguising the architecture of the building through the murals. So again, this, like I said, is rampant because everybody likes to copy, here. Whatever been done in one place, everybody wants to copy it and thinks it will work in the towns. Next. Also, some structures that are not contextually responsive to the immediate buildings is also something that you thought you are doing some good things to the townscape, but actually you not giving meanings to the place, because meaning is important, you know, how people read the city, how they relate to their history, their culture. For example, here in Central Market, you know, what has the wow got to do with the Central Market in KL? Because we know that this wow bulan is actually part of the arts and crafts in Kelantan. If this were to be done in Kota Baru Kelantan, then there's a meaning associated to it. But when you put it here in Central Market, then the people will be struggling to read it and then try to understand it, its relationship to the context. So that's why when you do things in the townscape, you have to also look into aspects of meaning and association with the cultural context of the place, not just to take anything goes from other places and put it in your part of the town or city. Next. Okay, in the end, townscape dominated by traffic and roads. Again, I'm hammering this point, you know, laboring this point so that, you know, to really sink into our brain the mediocrity that we are facing now in the townscape, celebrating the advertisement billboards and signages instead of the architecture and heritage. So giving priority to the roads and cars to move easily, but reducing the quality of for the pedestrians to enjoy the city. Next. Okay, another thing, utilitarian design to serve the purpose without aesthetic consideration and applying good urban design principles. So you see, Pekan Rabu, for example, is a unique place in terms of these market activities, but you look, the design is just like nothing to actually reflect the significance of the place culturally and historically. Next. Poor sense of color coordination erodes the local identity and sense of place. It's not to say, I think maybe they got some they wanted to advertise the you know, the paint company, Dulux, ICI and so forth, but you have to do with some sense of color coordination. For example, like in Malacca, the only building that is originally red is the Christchurch of Malacca. But what happened? Every part of building surrounding is being painted red. So I made a joke when I presented a talk in Myanmar. I said, this is a good example of painting the town red, because you got somebody sponsoring the red color and you splash it all over the place, you know. So using colors is important. You must also relate to the history of the place and the association of the color to the history and also to the culture of the people living in the place. So it's not just as easy as, okay, this is a very nice color, you just paint it red. But what happens is that you sort of erase part of the history of the place, where the only red color building is just the Christchurch. The rest are all white. Even the Start House was originally white. Why is now being painted red? So that's why I said this is part of the townscape quality that is missing. You know, that level of detail being given to even the choice of color in the townscape. Next. I think I'm getting to the last few slides now. Okay, so townscape without composition of the whole urban form will just be an ensemble of individual buildings. Like I said, some are beautiful design buildings on their own. But when you put them together as a group, they don't talk to each other. Next. Okay, good. So in conclusion, okay, the image of the city and quality of townscape affects perception, how the city is being read, which influence people's attitude and evaluation of the city that later affects their behavior. So we cannot actually, as designers, we cannot just forget about the people when we do design, because the design affects people. They don't go to the city with their eyes shut or being blindfolded. They actually read the city. So it's our role to actually give them, like I said, give them a good book to read through the townscape, not give a book that essentially will make them bored to death reading it. And then lack of sensory qualities, aesthetic qualities, and losing the art of building cities, making the city mundane, with people focusing on the functional aspects only when reading the city. And then another thing is that the townscape is full of symbolism and meaning. So it's very important for the townscape to be designed to respect this. Symbolism. When you look at certain people, it's going to send certain message to people. So you have to understand this aspect of symbolism and meanings. Why certain places are being appreciated, why certain kind of things are not being appreciated in that society. Next. We go to the last part. I don't need to conclude that much because I've been explaining all this. So my final note to all of you is that a town without a townscape heritage is like a man without a name. So I mean, if you erase all the townscape heritage that you have at the moment and build new, then it's like you have a man without name, because then you lose your identity. And a town without a clearly identifiable townscape character is like an orchestra without a conductor. Instead of entertaining people with a beautiful melody, they end up bombarding people with a stressful noise. And with that, thank you again for inviting me to this talk, and I pass it back to Dr. Aina.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this passionate, such fulfilling, I would say, fulfilling lecture slides, and also your presentation, Prof. Shuhana. We've got a few questions for you. I may have to limit them to 5, if that's okay with you, Prof, because I think we've got limited of time. Okay. So I'll probably share with you my, because I did copy paste the question somewhere else. Hold on, yeah. Okay, are you able to see my?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So maybe this 5 question would probably, sorry, these 4 questions would probably,
yeah. It may be related to each other. Okay. You want to read the question, or I just go straight?
I think you can go straight with the answer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think people can just read through the question. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Question 1 by Mazida, from PEREKABANDAR members. What are your views of the proposed KL? Why is it important? Okay, views of. Is there a new KL Creative and Cultural District proposal? I've heard before in the past that
there is by Think City.
Think City.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not aware of their detailed proposal, but what's important is district. The development of district development is important in the way we design our city, because the reason why district is actually one of the components that creates a clear image of the place. Like I said just now, we talk about clear image, it's not necessarily means a clear identity. So the importance when you have identified a district where you want to emphasize on creative and cultural district, then you must actually design is as such that when you talk about culture and creativity, sometimes if you're trying to be too creative about it, like that mural painting and so forth, you can actually kill off the local character of the place. So they should go hand in hand. A study about the culture is very important, because sometimes, when you go overboard to create identity to place, you impose other people's culture to the place, and there will be a mismatch between the because culture is actually a reflection of the value system, the attitudes, the way of life of the people. If you don't really study properly what is the real authentic culture of the people, you will end up enforcing a culture that is not appropriate for the place, and like what gentrification is doing to historic districts. Gentrification means you chase away the original community and you bring in a new community into the place which have a different value system, different way of life, activity. You, in the end, you change the character of the place. So, because I cannot comment more in detail because I'm not aware of what are the actual proposals. But I would like to caution that gentrification is actually not good if you want to try to create identity to the local district. The most important is to get as the original community to be staying in the districts and help to improve their quality of life by by designing places that actually respond to the way that they used to live their life and their the culture that they have already done over the past few years, and not to introduce something that it will new that will be actually killing off that local culture. But yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing. For most part, example exemplified the older period where time we may have considered demographic. Are there any contemporary new township in Malaysia that manifest the quality of the township? Um, I used to live in Putrajaya for 1 year. What they're trying to do in Putrajaya as a new town is good, but it's not appropriate. For example, they've got very good linkages, pedestrian walkways, so forth, but they put it in a place where there are no pedestrian to walk. So that is not sustainable, because when you do a nice pedestrian walkways, shaded by so you have to do it in a place where there are people walking, so that people can enjoy it, but not just to do it because you have the money and the budget to do so. So some parts of the places that they've done in Putrajaya is good in the sense that perhaps they have the budget to, and also because a lot of emphasis be given to landscaping the place to give comfort through the shading and and having lots of trees to provide shades for the people. But the way I see it, the good townscape qualities that we have in terms of the design, or the design of the buildings that actually like a composition of good, is not really I can see that much in the newer towns, because in the newer townships or newer towns, a lot of emphasis be given on individual buildings, just like in Putrajaya, where it's like a showcase of individual buildings. But if you look at them as a composition, they don't really respond to a certain rhythm or rapid sense of scale or proportion, because every building is like is been designed individually to reflect its own identity. So I mean, that my experience of staying in Putrajaya for 1 year there, I appreciate some aspects in as a new town, the recreational opportunity given to lots of parks and so forth, but it's not walkable. It's not a city that is walkable, which is actually a sad thing. You miss the opportunity. You build a new town and you miss to give a good example of a walkable town over there. And the emphasis on having a boulevard, in an area where there are just majority of it offices, government offices, it's not a good thing to do in urban design, because when you design in urban design, when you decided on a pedestrianized um, or a pedestrian priority area, it has to be places where there are lots of people walking. There's a lot of activities that is relating to the public realm, rather than for individual activities like offices. So that is the major drawback. And for the next question, in relation to identity, please correct me if I'm wrong. Most of our urban forms inherited from the Urbanism project, not to say they are all bad, but unlike most of the Middle Eastern cities, they were developed organically, like the Mediocre. In your project, is there any image of in Malay archipelago can be considered as developed organically? Usually organic, when you see a city growing organically, that is normally been done in the past, when they don't have the kind of local authority we have with the regime, rigid regulations, setbacks and so forth, regulations that controlling the kind of development, and you have to submit for planning permission. So contemporarily, it's very difficult to have cities developing organically, except for villages with some kind of control. But most of the time now, after independence, there will be some kind of control, some kind of development control, some kind of acts, relating to like the UBBL and so forth. So very difficult to get in cities now going organically as compared to the past, before pre-independence, even during the British. During the colonial period, the city doesn't grow organically anymore, because they already have the building bylaws imposed, like the 5 walkway, the fire break and so forth. Then when you have some form of control, then you are already now restricting cities growing organically. And that's why when cities in the past used to grow organically, they have time to think how to build cities to respond to each other. But when now, with the pace of development that you have, there's no time to allow. But if you allow city to grow organically without any control, then you will have like a situation of like a squatter or this squatters area. They are organic, but they are haphazard in terms of development because there's no control. So not necessarily allowing organic development is a good thing. If we got the, like that in the past, there's so many squatters development, they just build without any kind of planning on just going on their own. Did you manage to present your PhD work to Professor Kevin? I cannot see the rest of the question, Aina, because been blocked by any. The last question.
Okay. Yeah, I can speak for you. So Muhammad Al-Fai is asking, did you manage to present your PhD work to Professor Kevin Lynch as an extension to his image of the city? Because I think you have introduced that your PhD is on the identity of the city.
I wish I could, but he was dead. I think by the time I finished my PhD. Because he was around in the 60s when I was born. So, but I knew a professor who used to work with Kevin for Lawrence Ruskin from MIT, because we were involved in this MIT UTM Sustainable City program. And he told me that he used to know Kevin Lee when he was still working at MIT. Yeah. So I wish I could present to him, but it's already dead by the time I finish. And it's not to say that I'm sorry that I criticize his work. I have to criticize his theory because I wanted to have something new to study for my PhD. Otherwise, I cannot get my PhD. So what I did was actually to complete what Lynch was doing, because there are three things that gives make an imageable city, which is identity, structure, and meanings. And Lynch missed out identity and meanings when he studied about imageable city. He just focused on structure. So I completed it through my PhD. Okay, so that's the answer to that question.
Okay. I think that's good. Yeah, congratulations for answering all the questions, and I think congratulations for having a really good talk to all of us. Actually, I think we are actually at the end of our session.
Yeah, it would be better if I were to conduct it physically, because when I give lecture, I really like to see the response on the faces of the people, so that I can tell whether what I'm saying, is actually giving some kind of reaction to the audience. But actually, well, online sometimes is a good thing to do when you want to get to arrange for less hassle to the audience. Yeah, physical. But to me, a physical lecture is the better one.
Okay, so this is why I'm inviting all participants to turn on their videos to say hi to Prof. Shuhana right here. For a group photography session. Yes, please. Can I have everyone to turn on your cameras? Can have a group session photo session now. And say hi to Prof. Shuhana as well. She really wants to see your faces.
Or am I talking to myself? Everybody's sleeping.
Tak. Veronica. Hold on, yeah. Okay. Okay, so everyone wave to Prof. Shuhana. She's not alone here, right? Okay. Okay, so Veronica, are you ready? Okay, it's okay, Prof. You can still continue.
See, the thing with online classes, people can just switch on and they can do some other work because they know there's a record of it. They can play it over and over again. So this is technology that actually we have to live with it. But because I'm very traditionalist in, I'm a very what do you call it? sometimes I can't handle this new technology. It's killing some of the way I see things.
The fun, the excitement.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So Veronica, are you ready to take the picture? On your count. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Veronica. Okay. So, Prof. Shuhana, okay, I think we will have our closing remarks lah, yeah? Okay, so I greatly appreciate for the presentation you gave to us. It was incredibly, I think, informative and interesting, and I think everyone really enjoyed it. I personally enjoyed it, inshallah, and I'll be sharing the recording to PEREKABANDAR soon. And at the same time, we are also sharing this video on our SABE. Okay, so there'll be a link circulated later. Okay, so on behalf of the class of Architectural Site Planning and also SABE of UCSI University, we'd like to thank Prof. Shuhana Shamsuddin for delivering and sharing with us your outstanding presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for letting me share something that is so like I said, so close to my heart. That's why you feel very passionate about it. Something that I haven't still stopped, wanting to advocate for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
No. To wish you travel safe for your Umrah, right? You are going to perform your Umrah tomorrow, isn't it? Okay, have a safe travel. Salam.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh from all of us. Okay. Salam sejahtera. Thank you everyone for participating.